Picture this, a wide, open ranch in Texas, rolling acres of golden grass, oak trees dotting the horizon, and a quiet pond glistening in the summer sun. For years, this land belonged to a man named Marcus Hall, a tall, broad-shouldered black rancher in his late 40s who worked his property with his own two hands. Marcus wasn't just proud of his ranch, it was his family's legacy. His grandfather had bought the land after serving in the army, and every fence post, every patch of pasture had been cared for by the Hall family for generations. But Marcus had a problem. You see, when a suburban development called Cedar Grove Estates was built right next to his ranch, the Homeowners Association wasn't too happy about their wealthy little enclave sitting beside a working ranch. At first, Marcus thought nothing of it. He kept to himself. His cattle grazed, his horses roamed, and he stayed far away from their HOA drama. But HOAs have a way of poking their noses where they don't belong. It started small. Letters slipped into his mailbox, complaints about the smell of livestock and unsightly barns visible from the community jogging trail. Then came the meetings. HOA board members knocking on his door, asking him if he'd consider putting up screening or keeping animals out of sight. Marcus laughed them off. "This ain't your property," he'd say, tipping his hat. "This ranch has been here long before your cookie-cutter houses." But the HOA didn't back off. One morning, Marcus woke up to find something strange. A construction crew was out by the boundary line hauling in tall, ugly metal fencing. It stretched across the eastern side of his property, his side. The HOA president, a slick man named Richard Langley, stood nearby with a clipboard, smirking like he owned the place. Marcus stormed over. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my land?" Richard didn't even flinch. "This isn't your land, Marcus. According to the survey we commissioned, this area falls within Cedar Grove's jurisdiction. We're putting up a fence to keep our community secure. You can still use your ranch. You'll just need to go around." Marcus clenched his fists. He knew his boundaries. His grandfather had settled those lines decades ago. But Richard had power, money, and a board of lawyers behind him. By the time Marcus could even think about filing a dispute, the fence was already up, 10 feet tall, chain link, and complete with a heavy gate that locked from the HOA's side. And here's the kicker. That fence didn't just sit on the edge of Marcus's property. It cut straight across the main road leading to his ranch house. Now every time Marcus wanted to drive home, he had to detour miles around through muddy back trails. The HOA had effectively caged him out of his own land. At first, Marcus tried to reason with them. He went to the HOA office, demanded access, demanded they take down the fence. Every time, Richard's smug face met him with the same line. "If you want access, you'll have to file a request with the board. We'll review it when we have time." They dragged it out for weeks. Meanwhile, Marcus's ranch work suffered. Feed deliveries couldn't make it through. His tractor couldn't fit down the muddy back roads. Even visiting family stopped coming by. Too much hassle just to reach the house. It was clear what the HOA was doing. They wanted to squeeze him, make life miserable until he sold the land. Marcus was furious, but he wasn't stupid. He wasn't about to let them steal his family's legacy. And then came the moment that sparked his revenge. One evening, Marcus sat in his pickup, staring at that shiny new gate blocking his road. The HOA had put in a coded entry system. Only residents of Cedar Grove had the code. But Marcus noticed something. The gate box itself wasn't owned by the HOA. It sat squarely on a sliver of his land, thanks to a decades-old easement his grandfather had negotiated with the county, which meant that gate technically belonged to him. Marcus couldn't help but grin. The HOA thought they had outsmarted him, but in their arrogance they'd placed their precious security system on his property, and in Texas law, that meant one thing: the easement holder had rights. The next morning, Marcus called up a locksmith, an old friend from high school who owed him a favor. Together they dismantled the keypad system, swapped it out with a heavy-duty lock, and installed a brand-new gate mechanism, one with only one master key. Marcus slid the key into his pocket, turned it with a satisfying click, and locked the gate shut. From that moment on, if the HOA wanted to get into their own neighborhood, they had to go through him. The first signs of trouble came almost immediately. Cars lined up at the gate, honking, as residents realized their codes no longer worked. Richard Langley himself came storming down in a golf cart, red-faced and sputtering. "Marcus, open this gate right now. This is private HOA property." Marcus leaned on his truck, calm as ever. "No, Richard, this gate's on my land, which means it's my gate. And last I checked, I don't recall giving you a key." The look on Richard's face was priceless. Pure panic mixed with rage. But Marcus wasn't done yet, because while the HOA scrambled, while residents called the police and demanded answers, Marcus was already one step ahead. He'd spoken with the county clerk, filed the paperwork, and officially registered the gate system under his ownership. On paper, legally, it was all his. And the HOA? They had fenced themselves in. For days, chaos reigned inside Cedar Grove Estates. The once pristine neighborhood of manicured lawns and shiny SUVs had turned into a parking lot. Residents lined up at the gate, waving their key fobs uselessly at the new lock. Delivery trucks were stranded outside, landscapers refused to come in, and kids missed the school bus because their parents couldn't get to work on time. And there Marcus sat in his pickup truck at the edge of his ranch, sipping coffee and watching it all unfold. Richard Langley, the HOA president, was livid. He held emergency meetings, pacing in front of angry residents who demanded answers. "Don't worry," Richard assured them. "We're handling it. That man, Marcus, has no authority. This is our gate, our property." But every attempt the HOA made to fix the problem blew up in their faces. First, they called a locksmith of their own. But when he arrived, Marcus stepped forward with papers in hand. The locksmith took one look at the official easement documents, saw that Marcus was listed as the gate's legal owner, and packed up his tools. Next, they tried calling the sheriff. Deputies showed up, listened to both sides, and shook their heads. "Sorry, folks, gate's on his land, nothing we can do." The residents were furious at Richard, and the more pressure mounted, the more desperate he became. Marcus wasn't trying to be cruel. He wasn't the type of man to hurt people just for fun. But after weeks of being treated like dirt, after being fenced out of his own ranch, he wasn't about to let the HOA off easy. So, he made them an offer. One morning, as Richard and a small crowd of HOA board members stood fuming at the gate, Marcus strolled over. "Morning, neighbors," he said, smiling. "Listen, I got no problem sharing access, but you folks made life hard for me. So here's the deal. If Cedar Grove wants keys to my gate, you're gonna have to pay for them." Richard sneered. "You're extorting us." Marcus shrugged. "Call it what you want, but it's cheaper than tearing down the fence you built on my property." And with that, he pulled a handful of shiny brass keys from his pocket, dangling them just out of reach. Word spread fast. At first, residents were outraged. "Why should we pay him?" they complained. But after another week of blocked Amazon packages, missed garbage pickups, and having to park outside the gate and walk to their homes, frustration boiled over. So, one by one, families started showing up at Marcus's ranch with cash in hand. Marcus didn't charge much, just enough to make a point. $50 a key. But with over 100 homes in Cedar Grove, it added up quick. And Marcus didn't stop there. He kept records, neat and tidy, with signatures from every resident who came by. He wanted it all documented, legal, and airtight. The best part? Neighbors started treating him with respect. Folks who once scowled at his barn now smiled and shook his hand. Some even apologized for how the HOA had treated him. Of course, Richard was losing his mind. The man had built his reputation on controlling the neighborhood, and now he was powerless. He refused to pay Marcus a dime, insisting the HOA would win in court. But when Cedar Grove residents realized their own president couldn't get through the gate, they turned on him. At the next board meeting, they voted Richard out. Humiliated, he packed up and moved away within months. And Marcus? He kept the master key. Here's where it gets even sweeter. When Richard's house went up for sale, Marcus saw an opportunity. He'd been saving money for years, dreaming of buying back some of the land his grandfather had once owned but sold off, and thanks to the cash he'd collected from all those keys, he had enough for a hefty down payment. So Marcus bought it. That's Retier. The black rancher the HOA had tried to fence out was now the proud owner of the ex-president's home, smack in the middle of Cedar Grove. From that day forward, the dynamic in Cedar Grove changed completely. The new HOA board avoided Marcus like the plague, terrified of provoking him again. Neighbors waved when they saw him, kids asked if they could come by and ride his horses, and delivery trucks had no trouble getting in anymore, because Marcus controlled the gate. The fence the HOA had built to squeeze him? It ended up caging them. And Marcus? He didn't just keep his family's ranch. He expanded it, piece by piece, until Cedar Grove had no choice but to accept that the land they'd tried to push out was the very land that owned them. As Marcus liked to say, standing tall on his porch with the master key in his pocket, "They thought they could lock me out. Turns out, I'm the one holding the keys."